Hello, I'm here with the chairman of the Conservative Europe Group, Neil Carmichael. Neil, thank you for joining me. What are Britain's main gains from its membership with the EU?
Well, I think there are several. First of all, we're in the internal market, the single market, which is a huge opportunity for all of our businesses, especially in manufacturing and engineering, a sector which is growing at 1.3%. The second big advantage is actually access to a labour market, a capital market, which enables us to really expand our businesses where we want to. And the third big advantage is that we've got influence within the European Union so that it can pack a bigger punch globally, and that represents our interests best of all in terms of trade negotiations, as we're seeing with the United States.
Focusing on the economics, how important is the EU to the UK?
Well, a lot of people say there are 3.5 million jobs dependent on our membership of the European Union. It's always hard to gauge these things accurately, but what I know in my own constituency, for example, is that a large number of firms are actually manufacturing products which go into finished products across the continent, and that's really good for jobs in my constituency, and that I think applies to many other constituencies. So our connections to the European Union really matter when it comes down to the real economy.
Where do you see Britain's future if it were to leave the EU?
Well, I don't think we are going to leave the European Union anytime soon, and if we do have a referendum, then of course we will be fighting very hard, certainly I will, to stay in the European Union, a reformed European Union, but nevertheless staying in. Now, if we end up losing, there are some options. We can take the Norwegian option, which is basically pay a lot of money for the same access to the market, but have no influence on the European Union, and that would be one option. Another option would be the Swiss option, which is really stand to one side and watch what happens. And then still another option is to recalibrate our economy to a less international framework. But we will have to find out that if we lose. I'm fighting to stay in a reformed European Union.
Could we not have better trade links with countries outside the EU?
Being a member of the European Union does not stop us having relationships with other countries, and we need to develop those relationships. Our trade with Brazil, for example, is not yet sufficient. Our trade with China is good, but it's well behind the performance of Germany, so we need to improve there. So being in the European Union is not a preventing mechanism, it's actually an enhancing mechanism to make it even better.
How important would you say free movement of labour within the EU is to underpinning the single market?
If you want people to invest and move around, then free movement of labour is important. And let's just remember there's some positive aspects to this. And one of the obvious ones is we have well over 1 million Britons actually working in the European Union. And that actually is a big part of our overall economic footprint. And of course the other thing is that we do need skills that perhaps we haven't got. In some sectors we are a bit short, like for example electronics in the automotive industries. So we need to bring people in who have those skills.
Do you acknowledge any economic drawbacks for Britain as a result of its membership with the EU?
Well, of course, you know, like all forms of public bodies, structures, governments, institutions, there are imperfections. You have to reform everything from time to time. So there are things which are unhelpful. There are probably too many regulations, which I think people find difficult to comprehend. There are certain restrictions which we have to effectively navigate around, and it would be better if they weren't there at all. And there is this question about benefit tourism, which we're dealing with. We've looked at the common agricultural policy, and it does need further reform. We've changed it from being just a support mechanism of commodity prices to something more akin to an environmental policy, but still some people would say it's too expensive. Probably they're right. Then we've got the issue of energy. We haven't actually got a common energy policy, and instead we've got effectively nation states creating their own energy policies not consistent with each other's. So we actually might need a little bit more Europe there. So it's a changing world, it's a changing Europe. There are things in Europe we must change and must change quickly, and there are some things we should stop doing altogether in the European Union, but there are other things we should continue with.
How would you like to see Britain's relationship with the EU develop?
Well, I'm a great believer in the nation states having common agreement about key issues and working forward. And I think that's best done through the Council of Ministers, the European Summit process, rather than the European Parliament stroke Commission. So I think we need to see more planning, more policy making, more implementation through the Council of Ministers, and I'd like to see that more transparent, and I'd like to see that better understood as the key decision-making body of the European Union. And I also think it's important that we look at the Commission and make sure that it is actually the guardian of the treaty. That's one of its key functions. And it does actually think about the future of the European Union, but not without proper consultation with the political leaders of the nation states.
Mr. Carmichael, thank you very much.